My name is Jessica Hoover, I'm 28 years old, and this is the story of how my own father broke his promise to walk me down the aisle just hours before my wedding. You're probably thinking this sounds like every bride's worst nightmare, and you'd be absolutely right. But what makes this story truly shocking isn't just that he said no, it's the twisted reason why he chose my sister Sophia over me on what was supposed to be the most important day of my life. The betrayal cut so deep that it changed everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. And if you've ever felt like the black sheep in your own family, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up, because I have a feeling my story might sound painfully familiar to you. I still remember standing in my wedding dress, looking at myself in the mirror just 12 hours before I was supposed to walk down that aisle. My hands were shaking as I held my phone, reading the text message that would shatter my world. "Jessica, I can't walk you down the aisle tomorrow. Sophia needs me more right now." 23 words that destroyed years of planning and dreaming. I had spent months imagining that perfect moment when my dad would take my arm, smile at me with pride, and give me away to the man I loved. Instead, I was left wondering how I could have been so naive to believe that this time would be different. The thing about family betrayal is that it hits you like a freight train when you least expect it. You spend your whole life thinking that blood is thicker than water, that family will always have your back when it matters most. But sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the ones who hurt you the deepest. My relationship with my dad had always been complicated, but I thought my wedding day would be sacred, untouchable. I was wrong, and the worst part is that deep down, a part of me had seen this coming all along. What makes this story even more twisted is that my sister Sophia had planned this entire thing. She didn't just accidentally schedule something important on my wedding day. She orchestrated it perfectly, knowing exactly which buttons to push to get our father to choose her over me. It was like watching a master manipulator at work, except the target was my own special day. The level of calculation and cruelty still takes my breath away when I think about it. She knew that our dad had a weakness when it came to her tears and dramatic emergencies. But here's where the story gets interesting, and why I'm sharing it with all of you today. Sometimes the worst betrayals in our lives become the catalyst for the most incredible transformations. What happened next didn't just change my wedding day. It changed my entire relationship with my family, and taught me something powerful about standing up for myself. You won't believe how this story unfolds. And trust me, the revenge I got was sweeter than I could have ever imagined. So buckle up, because we're just getting started. And the next part of this story will show you exactly how my sister's manipulation backfired in the most spectacular way possible. Let me paint you a picture of what my family dynamic looked like growing up, because understanding this is crucial to everything that happened on my wedding day. My sister Sophia was always the golden child, 3 years younger than me, but somehow always the center of attention in every room she entered. She had this incredible ability to turn on the charm when she needed something, and our parents, especially our dad David, fell for it every single time. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one, the reliable daughter who never caused drama or asked for too much. And if you've ever been the easy child in your family, you know exactly how invisible that can make you feel. So please show some love by hitting that subscribe button and let me know in the comments if this resonates with you. Growing up, I watched Sophia master the art of emotional manipulation like it was her full-time job. Whenever she wanted something, whether it was money, attention, or to get out of trouble, she knew exactly how to play the victim. She would cry these perfect tears that made our parents rush to her rescue, while I stood there wondering why my achievements and good behavior never seemed to matter as much. It was like watching someone play a video game where they knew all the cheat codes. Except the game was our family, and I was always losing. The pattern was so consistent that I started to believe maybe I really wasn't as important or lovable as she was. The emotional weight of always coming second in your own family is something that follows you into every relationship and decision you make as an adult. I spent years in therapy trying to understand why I felt like I had to earn love instead of just receiving it naturally. My therapist helped me realize that I had been conditioned to believe that being low maintenance meant being less worthy of attention and care. Every time Sophia created chaos and got rescued, it reinforced this toxic message that drama gets rewarded while stability gets ignored. It's a lesson that shaped how I viewed myself for decades. When I got engaged to my fiancé Marcus, I was determined that my wedding would be different. This was going to be my moment to shine, my day to feel special and prioritized by the people who mattered most to me. I had conversations with my dad months in advance, asking him if he would walk me down the aisle, and he seemed genuinely excited about it. For once, I felt like I was going to be the star of my own story, instead of a supporting character in Sophia's drama. The irony is that I should have known better than to trust that Sophia would let me have even one day without making it about herself. But here's what I didn't understand back then. Sometimes the universe puts us exactly where we need to be to learn the lessons we're meant to learn. What felt like the worst betrayal of my life was actually the beginning of my journey toward finding my own voice and setting boundaries with toxic family members. The pain of that moment was excruciating, but it was also the wake-up call I needed to stop accepting crumbs of love from people who should have been giving me the whole meal. And when I tell you what happened next, you're going to see how this story becomes less about what they did to me and more about how I finally learned to fight back and reclaim my power. Looking back now, I can see that the warning signs were always there, scattered throughout my relationship with Sophia like breadcrumbs leading to a trap I was too naive to see coming. Even as children, she had this uncanny ability to sense when something good was happening to me and find a way to either steal the spotlight or create drama that would overshadow my moment. When I graduated valedictorian from high school, she suddenly developed mysterious stomach pains that required an emergency room visit right before my graduation ceremony. When I got my first promotion at work, she called crying about her latest breakup, needing Dad to come rescue her from another self-created mess. The pattern was so consistent that I started to dread sharing good news with my family, knowing that somehow Sophia would find a way to make it about her suffering. The most painful part wasn't even Sophia's behavior itself. It was watching my parents, especially my dad, fall for it every single time without ever questioning whether there might be a pattern. David would drop everything the moment Sophia needed him, canceling plans with me, missing important events in my life, always with the same excuse. "Your sister really needs me right now, Jessica. You understand, don't you?" And because I was the understanding daughter, I would always nod and smile, swallowing my disappointment and telling myself that being the bigger person was somehow noble. I was so busy being mature and reasonable that I never realized I was teaching them that my needs didn't matter as much as hers. One particular incident that should have been a massive red flag happened during my college graduation. I had worked my ass off for 4 years, maintaining a 3.8 GPA while working part-time to help pay for school, and I was so excited for my family to see me walk across that stage. 2 days before graduation, Sophia called Dad crying about how her roommate was being mean to her, and she needed him to drive 6 hours to her college to help her move out immediately. Not only did he go, but he also convinced my mom to go with him, leaving me to celebrate one of the biggest achievements of my life with just my boyfriend at the time. When I called them upset, Sophia got on the phone and accused me of being selfish for not understanding that she was in crisis. The gaslighting was so subtle and consistent that I started to question my own reactions to these situations. Was I really being selfish for wanting my parents to prioritize my important moments? Was I wrong to feel hurt when they consistently chose Sophia's manufactured emergencies over my genuine milestones? Sophia had this way of making herself seem like the victim even when she was clearly the one causing chaos, and somehow I always ended up being painted as the cold, unfeeling sister who didn't care about family. She would say things like, "I can't believe Jessica is making this about herself when I'm going through such a hard time," and suddenly I was the villain in a story where I was actually the one being hurt. But the most insidious part of this dynamic was how it trained me to expect less and less from the people who were supposed to love me most. I learned to celebrate my victories alone, to handle my problems without asking for help, and to always put everyone else's needs before my own. By the time my engagement rolled around, I had been so thoroughly conditioned to accept scraps of attention that when Dad initially seemed excited about walking me down the aisle, I was genuinely shocked. I should have known that Sophia wouldn't let me have even one day where I was the priority. But I was so desperate for my father's attention that I ignored every red flag that was practically waving in my face. When Marcus proposed to me on a beautiful spring evening in our favorite park, I felt like I was finally getting the fairy tale moment I had dreamed about my entire life. The ring was perfect, his speech was heartfelt, and for once I felt like I was the star of my own story instead of a supporting character in someone else's drama. As we started planning the wedding, I knew there was one conversation I needed to have with my dad, and I was terrified of how it might go given our complicated history. If you've ever had to ask for something from a parent who's let you down before, you know that vulnerable feeling I'm talking about, so please hit subscribe and like this video, because I could really use your support as I share this emotional journey with you. I remember the exact moment I asked my dad to walk me down the aisle like it was yesterday. We were sitting on his back porch during a family barbecue, and I had been working up the courage all afternoon to bring it up. My heart was pounding as I said, "Dad, I know things have been complicated between us over the years, but it would mean the world to me if you would walk me down the aisle at my wedding." The look on his face when I asked him was something I hadn't seen in years, genuine pride and excitement. He actually teared up a little and said, "Jessica, I would be honored. I've been waiting for this moment since you were a little girl." For the first time in decades, I felt like I was truly his daughter, not just the responsible one who never needed anything. We spent the next few weeks talking about the wedding details. and I was amazed by how engaged and excited he seemed about the whole process. He asked about the venue, wanted to see pictures of my dress, and even offered to pay for the flowers as his contribution to the wedding. David seemed genuinely invested in making my day special, and I started to believe that maybe our relationship could finally heal through this shared experience. He would call me just to check on wedding planning progress, something he had never done before in my life. It felt like I was finally getting the father I had always wanted, and I was over the moon about it. The conversations we had during those weeks were some of the best we'd ever shared as father and daughter. He told me stories about his own wedding day, gave me advice about marriage, and even apologized for some of the ways he had let me down in the past. We talked about how he wanted to practice walking down the aisle so he wouldn't trip or do anything to embarrass me on the big day. I felt like we were building something new together, a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine care. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I had my dad's full attention and support, and it was intoxicating. But as the wedding date got closer, I started to notice subtle changes in his behavior that I should have paid more attention to. He would sometimes seem distracted during our conversations, checking his phone frequently or cutting our calls short because something came up. When I asked him about it, he would reassure me that everything was fine and that he was just busy with work. I wanted so desperately to believe that this time would be different, that finally I would be the daughter who got her father's unwavering support, that I ignored the little voice in my head warning me that leopards don't change their spots. The stage was being set for the biggest betrayal of my life, and I was too blinded by hope to see it coming. 3 weeks before my wedding, Sophia called me with what seemed like exciting news. She had been accepted into a prestigious art program that required her to showcase her work at a gallery opening. At first, I was genuinely happy for her, because despite all our complicated history, she was still my sister, and I wanted her to succeed. She seemed so excited and grateful, thanking me for always being supportive of her dreams, and for a brief moment, it felt like we were actually connecting as sisters. But then she mentioned the date of her gallery opening, and my blood ran cold. It was the exact same day as my wedding. If you've ever had a family member try to sabotage your big day, please hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments how you handled it, because I'm about to tell you how this manipulation unfolded. What made this situation so insidious was how Sophia presented it as a complete coincidence, acting shocked and devastated that the dates conflicted. She put on this whole performance about how she had no idea it was the same day, how she had tried to get the gallery to change the date, and how heartbroken she was that she might miss my wedding. But here's the thing about manipulative people. They're incredibly good at making their calculated moves look like accidents or unfortunate circumstances. I knew Sophia well enough to recognize her patterns, and the timing of this opportunity was way too convenient to be anything other than deliberate sabotage. She had months to plan this, and she chose my wedding day with surgical precision. The way she framed the conversation was masterful in its manipulation. She positioned herself as the victim of terrible timing, while simultaneously making it clear that this gallery opening was supposedly the opportunity of a lifetime that could make or break her artistic career. She kept saying things like, "I would never want to take attention away from your special day, but you understand how important this is for my future, right?" It was emotional blackmail disguised as sisterly vulnerability. She knew exactly what she was doing, playing on my lifelong conditioning to be the understanding, selfless sister who always put family needs before her own desires. But the real masterstroke was when she started crying about how torn she felt between supporting me and pursuing her dreams, making it seem like she was facing an impossible choice. She talked about how she had worked so hard for this moment, how the gallery owner specifically chose her work, and how missing this opportunity might mean she'd never get another chance. The performance was so convincing that for a moment, I actually felt guilty for having my wedding on her day. She had somehow managed to flip the script so that my wedding, planned for months, was now the inconvenience that was ruining her big break. The most devastating part was realizing that this wasn't a spontaneous crisis. This was a calculated attack designed to force my father into an impossible position where he would have to choose between his daughters. Sophia knew exactly which emotional buttons to push with David, and she was setting up the perfect storm that would leave me standing alone on my wedding day. What I didn't realize yet was that she had already started working on Dad behind the scenes, planting seeds about how much she needed his support and how I was strong enough to handle things on my own. The trap was set, and I was walking straight into it, still believing that somehow my wedding day would be sacred enough to be off-limits to her manipulations. The call came at 11:47 p.m. the night before my wedding, and I knew before I even answered that my world was about to fall apart. David's voice was strained and apologetic, but his words hit me like a physical blow. "Jessica, honey, I'm so sorry, but I can't walk you down the aisle tomorrow. Sophia really needs me right now, and I have to be there for her." I stood there in my hotel room, surrounded by wedding preparations, feeling like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. The rehearsal dinner had gone perfectly just hours before, with Dad giving a beautiful speech about how proud he was of me and how excited he was to give me away to Marcus. Now, less than 12 hours before the ceremony, he was abandoning me for Sophia's manufactured crisis. The conversation that followed was one of the most painful of my entire life, and I could hear Sophia coaching him in the background as he tried to explain his decision. He kept repeating phrases that sounded nothing like his usual way of speaking, things like family emergency and once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I realized she had literally scripted his excuses for him. When I asked him to explain exactly what this emergency was, he stumbled through some vague story about Sophia having a panic attack and needing him to drive her to the gallery opening because she was too nervous to go alone. The fact that he was choosing her imaginary mental health crisis over my real, planned, once-in-a-lifetime wedding day showed me exactly where I stood in his list of priorities. What broke my heart even more than his decision was how he tried to minimize the impact of what he was doing to me. He kept saying things like, "You're strong, Jessica, you'll be fine without me," and "You have Marcus now. You don't really need your old dad anymore." It was like he was rewriting history to make his betrayal seem less cruel, convincing himself that I didn't really need him so he could feel better about choosing Sophia. The irony wasn't lost on me that my lifelong role as the easy daughter, the one who never caused problems, was now being used as justification for abandoning me on the most important day of my life. My reliability had become my punishment. I tried desperately to reason with him, reminding him of all the conversations we'd had about this moment, how he had promised to be there, how much it meant to me to have his support and blessing. But every argument I made was met with another excuse about Sophia's needs being more urgent, more important, more worthy of his attention. The manipulation was so complete that he actually started to sound annoyed with me for being upset, as if I was being selfish for wanting my father at my own wedding. In that moment, I realized that no amount of pleading or logical argument was going to change his mind. Sophia had already won this battle before I even knew we were fighting. As I hung up the phone that night, sitting alone in my hotel room with my wedding dress hanging on the closet door, I felt a rage and determination I had never experienced before. This wasn't just about my wedding anymore. This was about a lifetime of being treated as less important, less deserving, less worthy of love and attention than my manipulative sister. But instead of collapsing into tears or begging him to reconsider, something inside me shifted. I realized that I was done being the victim in this toxic family dynamic, and if they thought they could destroy my wedding day, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. What happened next would change everything, and the revenge I got was more satisfying than anything I could have planned. To understand why this betrayal cut so deep, I need to take you back to my childhood and show you the foundation of dysfunction that led to this moment on my wedding day. Growing up in the Thompson household meant learning very early that love was conditional, attention was earned through drama, and being the good kid was actually a disadvantage in the family hierarchy. I spent my entire childhood trying to be perfect, thinking that if I just got better grades, caused fewer problems, and needed less attention, eventually my parents would notice and appreciate me the way they did Sophia. If you grew up feeling invisible in your own family, or like you had to compete for your parents' love, please subscribe to this channel and hit that like button. Sharing these stories helps us all heal from these deep wounds together. From the time I was 7 years old, I was essentially functioning as a third parent in our household, helping take care of Sophia and managing responsibilities that should have been handled by adults. While other kids were playing with dolls or watching cartoons, I was helping Sophia with her homework, mediating fights between her and our parents, and essentially becoming her emotional support system. Our parents praised me for being so mature for my age and such a big help, but what they didn't realize is that they were stealing my childhood and teaching me that my value came from what I could do for others, not from who I was as a person. I learned to suppress my own needs and emotions because there simply wasn't room for them in a family where Sophia's feelings took up all the available space. The pattern of me sacrificing for Sophia started so early that it became the foundation of our relationship and my identity within the family. When she wanted my toys, I was expected to share without complaint because she's younger. When she broke something of mine, I was told to be understanding because she didn't mean it. When she got into trouble at school, I was the one who had to help her catch up on missed work because I was better at school stuff. Every single interaction reinforced the message that her needs mattered more than mine, her feelings were more important than mine, and my job was to make her life easier, never the other way around. The most damaging part of this dynamic wasn't just the inequality, it was how it was disguised as virtue and family loyalty. My parents would praise me for being selfless and caring, making me believe that constantly putting others first was not only normal, but morally superior. They would tell other people how proud they were of what a good big sister I was, never realizing that they were essentially bragging about how well they had trained me to neglect my own needs. I became addicted to that praise, to being seen as the reliable one, even though it meant I was slowly disappearing as an individual with my own wants and dreams. By the time I reached high school, this pattern was so ingrained that I didn't even know how to identify my own needs, let alone ask for them to be met. I had become an expert at reading other people's emotions and anticipating their needs while being completely disconnected from my own inner world. When guidance counselors asked what I wanted to study in college, I honestly didn't know, because I had spent so much time focusing on what everyone else needed that I had never developed a sense of my own desires and ambitions. This childhood conditioning set the stage perfectly for the ultimate betrayal on my wedding day, because my father knew I would understand and be fine. After all, I always had been before. The hours between that devastating phone call and walking down the aisle alone were some of the darkest of my entire life, filled with an internal battle between the person I had always been and the person I was finally ready to become. Part of me wanted to call Dad back and tell him it was okay, that I understood, that family emergencies were more important than weddings, because that's what the old Jessica would have done. I had spent 28 years being the peacekeeper, the one who smoothed over conflicts and made everyone else comfortable, even at the expense of my own happiness. But another part of me, a part that had been buried under decades of people-pleasing, was absolutely furious and ready to fight back for the first time in my life. I paced around that hotel room for hours, having full conversations with myself, arguing between the voice that said I should just accept this betrayal quietly and the voice that was screaming for me to finally stand up for myself. The people-pleaser in me kept trying to rationalize Dad's decision, telling myself that maybe Sophia really did need him more, that maybe I was being selfish for wanting him there, that maybe this was just how families worked. But the stronger voice, the one that had been silenced for too long, was telling me that this was the final straw, that I deserved better, and that I was done accepting crumbs of love from people who were supposed to give me the whole meal. The most confusing part of this internal struggle was realizing how deeply I had internalized the idea that I didn't deserve the same level of care and attention as other people in my family. I caught myself actually feeling guilty for being upset about my father missing my wedding, as if my feelings were somehow less valid than Sophia's manufactured crisis. It's incredible how toxic family dynamics can warp your sense of reality so completely that you start to gaslight yourself, questioning whether your basic emotional needs are reasonable or selfish. I had to literally talk myself through why it was okay to want my father at my wedding, which shows just how damaged my relationship with my own worth had become. What finally broke through the confusion was imagining myself in 10 years, looking back on this moment and knowing that I had once again chosen to be small, to accept less, to prioritize everyone else's comfort over my own dignity. I realized that if I just swallowed this betrayal like I had swallowed so many others, I would be setting myself up for a lifetime of being treated as an afterthought by my own family. The thought of my future children watching their grandfather choose their aunt's drama over their mother's important moments was what finally gave me the clarity I needed to stop making excuses for people who clearly didn't respect me. But the real breakthrough came when I stopped focusing on what I was losing and started thinking about what I was gaining, the opportunity to finally break free from a toxic dynamic that had controlled my entire life. Standing in that hotel room, surrounded by the remnants of my shattered expectations, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to walk down that aisle alone, with my head held high, and I was going to start living life on my own terms instead of constantly trying to earn love from people who had already shown me exactly how little I meant to them. The scared little girl who had spent her whole life trying to be perfect enough to matter was finally ready to step aside and let the strong woman I was meant to be take control of the story. The morning of my wedding, as I was getting ready to face the biggest day of my life without my father, I received a text message that revealed the true depth of Sophia's manipulation and changed everything I thought I knew about this situation. My cousin Rachel, who lived in the same city as Sophia, had sent me a screenshot from social media that made my blood boil. It was Sophia's Instagram story from the night before, showing her at a party with friends, laughing and drinking, with the caption, "Last night of freedom before my big gallery opening tomorrow." There was no sign of the panic attack or emotional breakdown that had supposedly required Dad's immediate presence and support. She was literally celebrating her successful manipulation while I was falling apart in my hotel room, and the casualness of it all made me realize just how calculated and cold-hearted this entire scheme really was. What made the discovery even more infuriating was scrolling through her social media and seeing the weeks of preparation that had gone into this sabotage. There were posts from months ago about her upcoming gallery opportunity, tagged locations showing her scouting the venue, and even conversations with friends about how excited she was for her special day. This wasn't some last-minute opportunity that coincidentally conflicted with my wedding. This was a deliberately planned attack designed to steal my thunder and prove once again that she could control our father's attention whenever she wanted it. The level of premeditation was staggering, and it showed me that she viewed my wedding not as her sister's special day, but as competition that needed to be eliminated. But the most revealing part was discovering that her gallery opening was actually just a group show at a small local coffee shop, not the prestigious art exhibition she had described to our family. Rachel had driven by the venue out of curiosity and sent me photos showing that it was basically an open mic night with some artwork on the walls. Hardly the career-defining moment that supposedly justified destroying my wedding day. The gap between Sophia's dramatic description of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and the reality of what it actually was showed me just how skilled she was at manipulating the truth to serve her purposes. She had turned a casual coffee shop art display into a life-or-death career emergency that required our father's immediate intervention. The realization that Dad had chosen this manufactured crisis over my actual wedding was almost more painful than the original betrayal itself. It meant that he hadn't just made a difficult choice between two important events. He had been completely manipulated into believing a lie, and he hadn't bothered to verify Sophia's story or consider the magnitude of what he was giving up. The fact that a simple Google search or phone call could have revealed the truth about her emergency made his decision even more hurtful, because it showed that he trusted her word completely while being willing to break his promise to me without a second thought. As I sat there looking at the evidence of Sophia's deception, I felt something shift inside me that went beyond anger or hurt. I felt a cold, calculated determination to make sure this manipulation backfired on her in the most spectacular way possible. She had played this game thinking she was the only one who knew the rules, but she had just taught me everything I needed to know about how to fight back. What she didn't realize was that her victory was about to become her greatest defeat, because I was done playing the victim in her twisted games, and the revenge I was planning would expose her manipulation to everyone who mattered. The student was about to become the master, and Sophia had no idea what was coming for her. In the darkest moment of my life, when I felt completely abandoned by my own family, an unexpected angel appeared in the form of Julia, my wedding planner, who would become the hero of this entire story. Julia had been coordinating weddings for over 15 years and had seen every kind of family drama imaginable. But when I called her crying at 6 a.m. on my wedding day to explain that my father wouldn't be walking me down the aisle, her immediate response wasn't just professional sympathy, it was genuine outrage on my behalf. She said something that changed my entire perspective. "Jessica, honey, I've seen a lot of selfish family members in my time, but this level of manipulation is next-level cruel, and we're not going to let them ruin your day. If you've ever had a stranger show you more kindness than your own family, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up, because Julia's support saved not just my wedding day, but my entire sense of self-worth." What made Julia so special wasn't just that she was good at her job, it was that she saw the situation for exactly what it was and refused to let me make excuses for my family's toxic behavior. When I started apologizing and saying maybe I was overreacting, she stopped me mid-sentence and said, "Stop right there. You are not responsible for managing other people's emotions or making their bad choices seem reasonable. Today is your day, and anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve to be part of it." She had this way of cutting through all the gaslighting and manipulation I had been drowning in and reflecting back to me what was actually happening, that I was being treated terribly by people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Julia immediately sprang into action with a level of care and attention that I hadn't received from my own father in 28 years. She arranged for her assistant to bring me breakfast, called in a favor with a local photographer to capture some beautiful getting-ready photos that would help fill the timeline, and even reached out to Marcus's father to see if he would be honored to walk me down the aisle instead. But more than the practical support, she gave me something I desperately needed: validation that my feelings were completely justified and that I deserved so much better than what my family was giving me. She treated me with the respect and care that I should have been receiving from my blood relatives. The most incredible thing Julia did was help me reframe this entire situation from a story about what I was losing to a story about what I was gaining. She pointed out that walking down the aisle without my father meant I was literally walking toward my new family, Marcus and his parents, who had shown me more genuine love and support in 2 years than my biological family had in decades. She helped me see that this moment, as painful as it was actually symbolic of me choosing the people who truly valued me over the people who took me for granted. It was like she gave me permission to stop mourning what I wasn't getting and start celebrating what I deserved. What I didn't know at the time was that Julia was quietly working behind the scenes to document everything that happened that day and her evidence would become crucial to the revenge that was already forming in my mind. She understood that this wasn't just about salvaging my wedding day. This was about me finally standing up to a lifetime of manipulation and mistreatment. As I would soon discover, having someone in my corner who truly saw and valued me would be the catalyst for the most empowering transformation of my entire life, and Sophia and my father had no idea what storm they had unleashed by pushing me to my breaking point. Walking down that aisle alone turned out to be the most empowering moment of my entire life, and I want every person watching this to understand that sometimes our greatest victories come disguised as our deepest disappointments. As I took each step toward Marcus and his family, who were all crying tears of joy and pride for me, I felt a strength I never knew I possessed rising up from somewhere deep inside my soul. The absence of my father, which I had thought would ruin everything, actually became the moment I finally learned to validate myself instead of waiting for someone else to do it for me. If you've ever had to choose between your own dignity and keeping toxic people happy, please hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments how you found the courage to choose yourself, because that's exactly what I did on my wedding day. The transformation wasn't just internal. Everyone at the wedding could see that something powerful was happening as I walked down that aisle with my head held high and my shoulders back. Instead of the broken, abandoned daughter I had felt like in my hotel room, I was radiating confidence and self-respect in a way that made the entire ceremony feel more meaningful and authentic. Marcus told me later that watching me walk toward him alone was one of the most beautiful things he had ever seen, because he could literally see me choosing our life together over the dysfunction I was leaving behind. The guests weren't whispering about my father's absence with pity. They were in awe of my strength and grace under pressure. What I learned in that moment was that sometimes the people who hurt us the most actually give us the greatest gift by showing us exactly who they are and forcing us to stop making excuses for their behavior. My father's betrayal, as painful as it was, finally gave me permission to stop trying to earn love from someone who was never going to give it freely. For 28 years, I had been chasing his approval, trying to be perfect enough to matter, and his absence on my wedding day was actually the answer I had been seeking. I didn't need his validation to be worthy of love and respect. The lesson wasn't that I wasn't good enough for him. The lesson was that he wasn't good enough for me. The most profound realization came during our vows, when I looked into Marcus's eyes and understood for the first time what unconditional love actually felt like. He wasn't marrying me because I was convenient or easy, or because I made his life simpler. He was marrying me because he genuinely valued who I was as a person and wanted to build a life with me as an equal partner. The contrast between his consistent, reliable love and my family's conditional, manipulative version of affection was so stark that it finally clicked why I had always felt so anxious and insecure in my relationships with my parents and sister. By the end of the ceremony, I realized that my father's absence had actually been the best wedding gift he could have given me, because it forced me to stop waiting for other people to make me feel complete and start creating that wholeness for myself. I walked back down that aisle as a married woman who finally understood her own worth, and the confidence I felt in that moment would carry me through everything that was about to happen next. Little did Sophia know that her manipulation had backfired in the most spectacular way possible. Instead of ruining my day, she had inadvertently given me the push I needed to finally break free from our toxic family dynamic and start fighting back on my own terms. The days following my wedding were a whirlwind of emotions as the reality of what had happened began to sink in, and I started to understand just how deeply this betrayal had affected not just me, but everyone who witnessed it. Extended family members, family friends, and even people who barely knew our family dynamics were reaching out to express their shock and disappointment at my father's behavior. My Aunt Karen, who had always been the family peacemaker, called me crying and said she had never been so ashamed of her brother in her entire life, and that watching me walk down that aisle alone with such dignity had been both heartbreaking and inspiring. If you've ever experienced a public family betrayal that opened other people's eyes to toxic dynamics they hadn't seen before, please subscribe and like this video, because I want to hear your stories about how these moments can actually become catalysts for positive change. What surprised me most was discovering how many people had been quietly witnessing and judging my family's treatment of me for years, but had never felt it was their place to say anything until this wedding incident made it impossible to ignore. Cousins, family friends, and even some of my parents' neighbors started sharing stories with me about times they had watched Sophia manipulate situations and seen my father consistently prioritize her manufactured crises over my genuine accomplishments. My college roommate told me she had always wondered why I never talked about my family with pride the way other people did, and now she understood that I had been protecting them by not sharing how dysfunctional our relationships really were. The ripple effects of that day extended far beyond just my immediate family, creating a network of support I never knew existed. and forcing people to take sides in a way that revealed everyone's true character. Marcus's family, who had already welcomed me with open arms, became even more protective and loving after witnessing how my own family treated me. His mother actually confronted my mother at the reception, telling her that she was ashamed to be associated with people who could treat their own daughter so cruelly on her wedding day. Meanwhile, some of my father's siblings started questioning their own relationships with him, wondering what other manipulations they had missed over the years. But the most significant impact was on my own relationship with boundaries and self-advocacy, skills I had never properly developed because I had been trained from childhood to prioritize everyone else's comfort over my own well-being. The public nature of this betrayal meant I couldn't hide from it or make excuses for it the way I had done with smaller incidents throughout my life. Everyone could see exactly what had happened, which meant I couldn't gaslight myself into believing I was overreacting or being too sensitive. For the first time in my adult life, I had clear, undeniable proof that my family's treatment of me was objectively wrong, and that validation gave me the courage to start setting boundaries I should have established decades ago. The most transformative realization was understanding that this disappointment, as crushing as it felt, was actually liberating me from a lifetime of false hope and unrealistic expectations. I had spent years believing that if I just tried harder, loved more, gave more, eventually my father would see my worth and treat me with the same care and attention he gave Sophia. His choice to miss my wedding for her coffee shop art show was so clearly wrong that it finally killed that hope completely. And surprisingly, that felt like freedom rather than loss. I was finally free to stop performing for people who would never appreciate the performance, free to invest my emotional energy in relationships that actually nourished me, and free to start building the life I wanted instead of the life I thought would finally make them proud of me. After everything that happened with my wedding and the months of healing that followed, I've come to understand some hard truths about what family really means and what it doesn't mean, lessons that I wish I had learned much earlier in my life. The most painful realization was that blood relation doesn't automatically create love, respect, or loyalty. Those things have to be earned and maintained through consistent actions, not just assumed because you share DNA. Real family is made up of people who show up for you consistently, who celebrate your victories without making them about themselves, and who support you through difficult times without keeping score or using your vulnerabilities against you later. If you've had to learn the difference between biological family and chosen family the hard way, please subscribe to this channel and hit that like button, because understanding this distinction is one of the most important lessons we can learn about building healthy relationships. The hardest part of accepting this truth was letting go of the fantasy family I had been trying to create through my own perfect behavior and endless accommodation. For decades, I had operated under the belief that if I just loved them enough, gave enough, sacrificed enough, eventually they would transform into the parents and sister I needed them to be. But what I learned through therapy and painful experience is that you cannot love someone into treating you better. They have to want to change, and they have to do the work themselves. My father and Sophia were never going to suddenly develop empathy, fairness, or genuine care for my well-being just because I kept hoping they would. What replaced that fantasy, however, was something much more valuable: a clear understanding of what healthy family relationships actually look like. Modeled by Marcus's family and the chosen family, I began building around myself. I watched how his parents celebrated both their children equally, how they resolved conflicts through honest communication rather than manipulation, and how they made decisions based on fairness and love rather than whoever could cry the loudest or cause the most drama. It was like seeing a completely different language of family interaction, one where people's needs mattered equally, and where love wasn't used as a weapon or bargaining chip. The most liberating discovery was realizing that I didn't have to keep toxic people in my life just because we were related, and that setting boundaries with family members wasn't cruel or ungrateful. It was necessary for my mental health and self-respect. I learned that saying no to people who consistently hurt me wasn't mean. It was self-preservation. I discovered that I could love people from a distance without allowing them to continue damaging my peace and happiness. The guilt I had carried for years about not being a good enough daughter and sister began to dissolve as I understood that I had been trying to win in a rigged game where the rules changed whenever I got close to succeeding. Building a chosen family of friends, mentors, and Marcus's relatives who actually valued and respected me showed me what I had been missing all those years trying to force relationships with people who were incapable of giving me what I needed. These new relationships were based on mutual respect, genuine affection, and shared values rather than obligation, manipulation, and guilt. For the first time in my life, I experienced what it felt like to be truly seen, appreciated, and supported by people who wanted the best for me without any hidden agendas or emotional games. That's when I realized that my father missing my wedding wasn't the end of my family story. It was the beginning of my journey toward building the loving, supportive family I had always deserved. As I reflect on this entire experience now, more than a year later, I can honestly say that my father's betrayal on my wedding day was the catalyst for the most important personal growth of my entire life, even though it was also one of the most painful experiences I've ever endured. What started as the worst day of my life became the day I finally learned to value myself enough to demand better treatment from everyone around me, including the people I was supposed to be able to count on most. The strength I discovered when I walked down that aisle alone has carried me through every challenge since then, reminding me that I am complete and worthy all by myself, without needing anyone else's approval or validation to know my own worth. The most surprising outcome has been watching how my refusal to accept their toxic behavior has actually improved some of my family relationships, while making it clear which ones were never worth fighting for in the first place. My mother, who initially defended my father's decision, eventually came to understand how wrong it was and has been working to rebuild our relationship on more honest, respectful terms. Some extended family members have also reached out to apologize for enabling the dysfunction for so many years and to express their admiration for how I handled the situation. But my father and Sophia have shown no remorse or willingness to change, which has made it easier to maintain the boundaries I've established with them. The ripple effects of that day have touched every aspect of my life in positive ways that continue to surprise me. My marriage with Marcus is stronger because I finally learned how to communicate my needs clearly instead of expecting him to read my mind or guess what I wanted. My friendships are more authentic because I stopped being afraid to show my true feelings and opinions. My career has flourished because I finally started advocating for myself and asking for what I deserved instead of quietly hoping someone would notice my hard work. Learning to stand up for myself in that hotel room gave me permission to stand up for myself everywhere else too. What I want everyone watching this to understand is that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are actually giving us the greatest gift: the opportunity to finally see our situation clearly and make the changes we've been too afraid to make. My father's betrayal forced me to confront truths I had been avoiding for decades, and while it was incredibly painful, it was also incredibly necessary for my growth and healing. The version of myself who walked down that aisle alone was stronger, more self-aware, and more deserving of love than the people-pleasing, boundaryless person I had been before that moment. If you're dealing with toxic family members who consistently put their own needs above yours, who manipulate situations to maintain control, or who make you feel like you have to earn basic respect and kindness, please know that you deserve so much better than that. You don't have to accept mistreatment just because it comes from family, and choosing yourself over dysfunction isn't selfish. It's necessary. My wedding day taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to stop trying to fix people who don't want to be fixed, and start building the life you actually want with people who genuinely care about your happiness and well-being. If you've made it this far in my story, it means you understand the power of choosing yourself over toxic relationships, and I want to hear about your own journey towards self-respect and boundary setting. Drop a comment below telling me about a time when you had to walk away from someone who was supposed to love you, or when you finally stood up for yourself after years of accepting less than you deserved. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to find their own courage to break free from toxic family dynamics. And if this video resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because I share stories like this every week to help people realize they're not alone in these struggles. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It really helps other people find these stories when they need them most. The comments section of this channel has become such a beautiful community of people supporting each other through family trauma, toxic relationships, and the journey toward building healthier boundaries with difficult relatives. I read every single comment and often find inspiration for future videos based on the experiences you share with me. Whether you're dealing with a manipulative sibling, controlling parents, or just trying to figure out how to love toxic family members from a safe distance, this community understands what you're going through, because we've all been there. Some of the most healing conversations I've ever had have happened right here in these comments, where strangers become friends through shared experiences of overcoming family dysfunction. What I love most about sharing these stories is hearing how they've helped people recognize patterns in their own families that they couldn't see clearly before, or given them permission to trust their instincts about relationships that felt wrong but they couldn't explain why. So many viewers have told me that watching these videos helped them realize they weren't crazy, overly sensitive, or asking for too much. They were just dealing with people who weren't capable of healthy relationships. If my story helped you see your own situation more clearly, please share it with someone else who might need to hear it. Sometimes we need outside perspective to understand that what we're experiencing isn't normal or acceptable, even when it comes from family. I also want to encourage you to check out some of my other videos if you're interested in more stories about overcoming family betrayal, setting boundaries with toxic relatives, and building the life you actually want instead of the one other people expect you to live. Next week, I'll be sharing the story of how I handled the aftermath of going no contact with my father and sister, including the family members who tried to pressure me into forgiving and forgetting, and how I learned to stand firm in my boundaries, even when it meant disappointing other people. The journey toward healing from family trauma is ongoing, and I'm committed to sharing both the struggles and the victories along the way. Thank you so much for watching, for sharing your own stories, and for being part of this incredible community of people who refuse to accept toxic treatment just because it comes from family. Remember that choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary for your mental health, your relationships, and your overall happiness in life. If you want to see more content about family drama, revenge stories, and learning to value yourself after years of being undervalued, make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on. I'll see you in the next video, where I'll be sharing even more shocking details about what happened when my extended family finally learned the truth about Sophia's manipulation. And trust me, the fallout was even more dramatic than you might expect.